I want to continue on the discussion for what we were mentioning within Instagram. And like I said, I think a lot of people were really excited about this chapter, namely to get some additional information about these areas of Instagram brand ambassadors um, and social media influencers. As well as some of the features that go along with Instagram. And so, having to create this PowerPoint simply because I just can't show some of the analytics that I would be able to normally show just because, this is something that I don't have the followers for my personal account. So, unfortunately, I can't show that. However, there's a lot of good information about what is the state of things as of right now for Instagram. So let's look at some features here for marketing experts. So first and foremost, we mentioned on a couple of these, I think actually we went past some of them, mentioning push notifications. So let's keep going. I think this is where we are. The other thing is talking about geotagging, which I like personally as an idea for understanding where you are and what are some things nearby. This particularly helps if you're traveling, especially in a place that you don't know that well. I did some geotagging when I was over in Switzerland, and one of the things that I noticed while I was over there was I started getting some advertisements for some places that were nearby. And more specifically, I got some places that I would have normally not looked up, but were specific to that market. So they had paid some money in social media to be able to be in this specific location, so that when people are there, they could recognize it. Because this wasn't exactly, a well-known city. It was Lugano. So I wasn't in, Zurich or Bern or anything like that. So these or Geneva, I don't know why I made sure to mention that, but geotagging has a lot of pros in this case of really being able to specify your audience. The cons usually come up with a lot of people have been mentioning is, for one, and this has come up quite a lot in discussion, is how much does your social media know you better than most people? That if you search for one thing, if you mention that you're going somewhere, automatically you get advertisements for that place that you were looking for. So those cons are certainly something that many people take into consideration when they're saying, okay, I got to be careful about my own privacy. And privacy issues are obviously some of the big area here. Then tracking analytics and activity through third-party apps, especially if you can work with them. And part of that goes into like Hootsuite, for instance. So Hootsuite can look up any data that you have on Instagram, as I'm kind of looking at mine right now as I'm going through this conversation. But again, we can analyze a lot of that data, and we see a lot of the analytics. And again, you see these Hootsuite articles that have been providing over the past few weeks, and you see the consistent theme here. And the importance of the algorithm, what posts are prioritized, and so forth. So Twitter does a little bit different in terms of visual appeal, mentions, locations, as well as one of the oldest things within algorithms is how often you click on something. So if you find a particular brand, if you find a particular person that you enjoy viewing and you start liking their posts, so this happens a lot within Facebook, this happens a lot within YouTube, Twitter, any major social media outlet has this within their algorithm when it comes to their data analytics, because what occurs is when you start posting things and people enjoy them and like them, that's saying to the algorithm, this is the specific way that this page should run. And that's where the algorithm comes into play, and it obviously does a really good job here. But the way that we can look at Instagram is specific is it is a visual-based medium. It doesn't have a lot of text like Facebook would. So this visual appeal is created within the algorithms. Mentions become something along the lines of SEO, as well as location. So if you're near somewhere, the algorithm can factor into that as well. Then Ad Manager, you'll get the difference between organic and paid posts. So if you don't know the difference, it's very simple. Organic is basically just people who are scrolling along their Instagram or any kind of social media and find your post. You don't have to pay for it. You're not doing anything except for posting content. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. One thing that's been going around, um, Twitter and Instagram specifically, has been what's called hashtag D&D selfie. So this was Saturday Night Live posting something about nerd and nerd culture within D&D and very stereotypical element of what a D&D community looks like. So, for people who are self-proclaimed nerds such as myself and play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, which I do, one of the things that the community started doing was posting their D&D selfie, which had a picture of them and some of their accoutrement when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. But what they noticed was these mentions here comes into the hashtag and maybe the handle that you're using to call to somebody. In my case, I called out to NBCSNL. But what I noticed out of this, though, in terms of ad manager and organic posts, now this isn't revenue oriented or anything, but what occurs is, I had a lot of traction and a lot of people viewing my posts that kind of came into this organic post. Now, if I had shown that and paid some money towards it, that's where paid ads come into play. You can also look at this on YouTube. I posted a video a while ago when I went to the Game of Thrones orchestrated concert, which was really cool, by the way. And within a couple days, I had 6,000 views. And this was pretty interesting. This is a little off the chart with Instagram, but it talks about something that I didn't go for any monetization for this. I wouldn't have to use hashtag sponsor or not a sponsor for Instagram or whatever medium I was posted it on. But everybody was organic in terms of who was viewing this information. There wasn't a single person because I didn't pay for it to be boosted. And that's usually how Facebook calls it. Different social medias have different terms for it, but still kind of the same premise. So we can look at some of these like Instagram stories. I mentioned them a little bit here, but some of them are pretty interactive, as you can see here, in terms of swiping up, being able to put specific things within hashtags, polls. I don't know if you can read some of these. These are very popular. They also come up quite a bit in Snapchat, as I've regrettably created an account again, because that's the way some of my friends tend to want to communicate for reasons I'm not entirely sure. But this is just a way to customize things, and it works really well in terms of bringing that story to life. So it's no secret that businesses really use Instagram as well as use stories. How you use them, though, is pretty simple as well. The basic overview is that they last 24 hours. They're used to engage your audience and grow your business. Allows you to, and I'm not sure why I chose the word unleash here, but works with your creativity and gives your audience kind of a sneak peek background of it. Because especially if your audience is really someone that is interested in your company. So like say, recently the newest episode of Game of Thrones came out. One of the things they know through going through Instagram as well as the HBO app is people will make sure that they go into more in depth with their content. So this is very important to them, that they can see some of the behind the scenes, get to know some of the characters and the actors behind the characters. One thing I'll mention in terms of asking yourself, this actually comes from a textbook that deals with social media strategies, and it talks about questions about how you should post. And this is actually reflected on all social mediums. And it has to do with what's called the 4 U's: useful, unique, urgent, and ultra specific. Now, I think the ultra was kind of put in there just to keep with the U theme, personally, but is it useful, and is it useful to other people? This might be something you want to consider when you're creating or critiquing. So maybe this is something you want to put in your case study as a component for what you're trying to analyze here. So is this going to be useful, or is it something where people brag about, something they're doing? I couldn't help but notice as the poor Notre Dame burnt, caught on fire yesterday. People were posting these stories about themselves being at the Notre Dame, and I always wondered about that, and was kind of interested in why that was done. Whereas most people would say I'm horrified that this 800 some odd year history from the new renovations is finally the spire at least has gone down, and it's such a sad story. Is it unique? Is it different from everybody else? And that can be very difficult depending on what you're doing, but it's still it's still something you should consider in terms of what are your competitors doing. This is why we look at competitors all the time when we're trying to come up with our own strategy. Is it urgent? This is a foundation in what we call Kairos, which is, if you've ever heard of ethos, pathos, and logos, you may have even heard of mythos, but there's another one called Kairos that talks about striking while the iron's hot. And is it urgent? So this could do with crisis communication. This could do with a product release. How are we going to promote this in a timely manner? And then is it ultra specific? Obviously, we want to make sure that we have content that is very specific to our brand and specific to what we're trying to do. Whether again, if it's a product release, we want to make sure that we have a lot of information about it. Or, if we're dealing with a crisis, how much are we willing to disclose as it's going on? So that's very important as well. For story usage, first and foremost, be simple and direct. Transparency is really the key here. And I've noticed this a lot in terms of my own research through creating video. Being very transparent about your brand and being direct with your audience is very good in terms of your messaging. But it also helps to be very simple because of the medium that you're using, because there's not a lot of text. And this can honestly be some of the hardest writing for writing copywriting within advertising, because you've really got to consider, how can I state something with the fewest words possible, which deals with this amount of text. And I like this one in particular, creating a sense of urgency, as well as compelling users to act quickly. This is actually nothing new when it comes to advertising by itself, especially with copywriting, because a lot of the great copywriting big ideas or slogans are usually ones that have a sense of urgency or creating need. It's not necessarily that you actually have need per se, but it is something that we use to create need, to want people to act on something, as well as compelling to use the user to act quickly on something. So this is, again, nothing new. It's based on persuasion and the element of scarcity. How do I promote something? Is say that it's only going to be available for a limited time. And this would actually work and coincide really well with stories for Instagram, because you only have a day to use it. So it actually helps to convey that urgency based on how long you've got the media platform. So sometimes actually using this works to your advantage based on how the algorithm works in and of itself, and how the media vehicle works as well. So I'm going to stop right there. But I do want to cover the last bit of this for next class on Wednesday. Let me know if you have any questions about the journal article. Keep posting. I know Friday seems to be the day that everybody likes to post. I certainly get a lot of them at that point, but Keep them coming. I enjoy reading them, and I hope you have a wonderful day. All right, thanks.